Okay, um, welcome everybody, and thank you, Anthony, for being willing to be interviewed for this summit. Uh, this,
Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
this is Anthony McAveney, I think I said that correctly,
That's absolutely correct. Well done, Bruce.
who lives in Australia. So it's morning for me and evening for him, and
Yep.
that's the nature and the beauty of being able to do business on the internet. Anthony is an online business coach who helps solopreneurs to create online businesses. Before he created his own online business, he worked in corporate training and development across a number of industries, both in the public and private sectors. And he made the switch when he realized that the closest thing to real job security would only come from his own entrepreneurial activity. So welcome, Anthony. Thank you very much for agreeing to this interview, and it's great to have you here.
Thanks. I'm really, really delighted to be part of your summit, Bruce. Thanks again.
It's our pleasure. It's our gain.
Yep, indeed it is.
I'd like to start by having you tell us about your business, about what you do and who you help, and also about the people that need your help the most.
Okay, great question. It's taken me a little while to really zero in on that. I started to seriously get involved in the online world only about 4 or 5 years ago, although back in 2007 I developed my first website. And my career, apart from corporate training and development, has been pretty much extensively involved in outplacement coaching and counselling. So, I'm the bloke sitting in the office, typically next door to someone who is being told by his boss and the HR manager that their position's been made redundant. So way back then, I saw the devastation that job loss had on people's lives. And back then, and probably until I started to get in online, I started to have some difficulty coaching people in how to find another job, knowing all along that this episode that's happened to them could happen again and again. And in fact, in my career doing outplacement coaching and counselling, I came across repeaters, people who'd had their positions made redundant 2, 3, 4 times. And I started to develop a real conflict around that I started to get the entrepreneurial spirit in the 90s, which is a whole different story. But, my belief is that, if it is to be, it's up to me. And in terms of my own financial security and the ability to make choices about lifestyle, it'll be up to me, not to be looking to a boss to provide that form of security. So that then started to become the focus in my business. If I had a conflict about teaching people to find another job, what's the alternative? If I could then teach them how to become self-reliant. And of course, as you and I both know, with the advent of the internet and digital technologies, it's never, ever been any easier for someone to actually set up an online business. So that's primarily the target group that I help. And in particular, I guess it's people who are mid-career, tending towards late career, who've lost their jobs, and the prospect then of actually gaining re-employment, particularly in jobs that have been dissolved, if you like, as a result of advances in technology, artificial intelligence, robotics, and whatever. So those people have got a lifetime and a career of intellectual property and the ability to help solve problems for other people. But the question for them is, well, how do I reach my audience? How can I become self-sufficient? So that's target group number 1. And target group number 2 is people who are approaching or who have gone into retirement. Now, I'm retired from corporate life, and you can probably see from my age, I'm not a young bloke anymore. I know for a fact that people get really, really anxious about going into retirement for a couple of reasons. One is that a lot of people actually want to continue to work and to be productive members of society in retirement. And the other major driver for people is, how am I going to survive as my retirement savings start to run out, and so that I don't have to compromise on lifestyle? So that's the other audience that I help, is how do you then use that lifetime of experience to share things that you've developed in your career, or to share passions or interests that you have in life and actually make a business from it, so that you can actually have an additional income in retirement. So long-winded answer to your question, but they're the two groups that I look to develop. And what I want to help them to do is how to actually start an online business from scratch, a sustainable and a profitable business from scratch.
Okay, that's really great and thorough, and that gives us an excellent foundation for what we're going to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to know. Well, you know this. There are a number of people online who teach other people how to have online businesses.
Yes.
Now, part of that is going to be because the world's such a big place that it's impossible for one person to be known to everybody.
Yes.
But once you get past that, let's say that there are people who use you, who have used other people to help them start online businesses. What do you bring, or what is it about your style or your method that makes it so that people want to use you as opposed to somebody else who's teaching people how to start online businesses?
Okay, it's a really insightful question. And I think the answer to that is we could have several dozens of people. Well, you've mentioned there's probably more than dozens. There would be literally thousands of people that work in this space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think what brings people to me is that I have a unique voice. The world is so big, okay, and in this process, we have methods that we try to attract people to our offering, whether that be through paid advertising or organically. And there'll be sufficient people online who will respond to my voice and to the way that I communicate. There'll be people that maybe see me in some of the videos that I put on YouTube or in Facebook Lives, and they go, okay, this guy's got grey hair and not much hair. Looks as though he's lived life a little bit. He sounds as though he knows what he's talking about. And of course, I offer value in those sorts of instances. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just partly the initial contact that you have with people and the way that you establish credibility. But there'll be people that see some of my promotional stuff, see maybe some of my blog posts and lives, and go, you know what? He's an old bloke. You know, what would he know? So, and they may go for somebody in a different age group. So I think it's just one of those. It's one of those things. I'm not sure that there's a science to it. I'm very heavily involved in the metaphysical world and the law of attraction and those sorts of things. And I think it's partly also how people respond to your energy. It's not just the content. So I guess in any interpersonal relationship, there's either chemistry or there isn't. And I think, people begin to make judgments in the early days. Is this someone I can trust? Is this somebody that I can actually work with? So does that answer your question? Is that the sort of thing that you're looking for there, Bruce?
I don't know that I was necessarily looking for anything in particular, apart from your insights.
Right.
I
suppose if I could add to that, I think sometimes, and this is a sticking point for me at one point in my career online, is exactly the point you made earlier. There are lots and lots of people that work in this particular niche, this space. Mm-hmm. And so what I had to get around in my head was, why would anybody actually listen to me? Mm-hmm. If I'm teaching people similar sorts of skills, maybe not in exactly the same way, but why would they listen to me as opposed to somebody else who might be positioning themselves as a guru? Mm-hmm. And I think within my niche, there are people at beginner stage, there are people who are intermediate, there are people who are advanced. I'm sort of aiming to help people who are at the beginner intermediate stage. I may be leaving the advanced skills to the gurus. I've gone through that journey of learning a whole heap of skills on how to actually set up an online business. And, a big part of my satisfaction in life is actually helping people do that. I mean, it's been my life and my career anyway, in teaching people how to do stuff. It's my jolly place, if you like. So, that's where I'm coming from.
I think what you mentioned about chemistry is absolutely vital. Um, all of us will have had the experience of meeting somebody and feeling like we've sort of met almost a soulmate, someone
Yes,
we've known all our lives, even though we've only met them 5 minutes ago. And there'll be other
indeed.
people that we've known for years, and we feel like we can never really get close to them, even if we
Yeah,
want to. There's a
yeah,
kind of distance. There's something there that prevents you from getting close to them. I
yeah.
think
No,
that
you're
the business relationship that you have with people that makes it so that you can sort of become friends and be able to connect on that level and create that level of trust right away,
yes,
makes an enormous difference in the relationship that you then are able to establish, so you can help people achieve the things that they want to do.
yeah,
But there's always going to be people that you encounter and you're going to think, this person's just not right for me. And
yeah,
for that reason, I'm going to go over to this other guy because I really like him. I really get on
yes,
with him.
yeah. And I think also a big part of the equation here, from the business provider's point of view, is getting a really good handle on the problem that you're trying to solve for the client. And so each of us will have different perceptions about what our clients' needs are and what their problem is and what the urgency around that is and what's our unique solution to the problem. So, again, looking at it from the point of view of somebody who wants to set up an online business, there could be many things that prevent them from doing that. So somebody might be just looking for a piece of that puzzle. Well, they're not in my audience. I'm very clear that the people who will come in and work with me are
Mhm.
looking for somebody who can provide end-to-end process, end-to-end solution, not just a little piece of it.
Yeah.
And I think once you have clarity in your own mind, and you test that with your audience as well, but once you have that clarity about what it is your clients need, what is the problem that you're trying to solve, I think that makes also a really big difference in what you communicate and how you communicate it.
Yeah, and there's a linearity to the things that you need to do in order to create an online business, but there's so much overlap that making a distinction between those parts is, I think it's almost impossible. So you're because of the way that the information is presented, we can only give it really to people in a step-by-step fashion. But
Absolutely.
one of the things that I've noticed is that um, many people who teach this kind of thing seem to lack either the ability or the appreciation for the need for people to have a big picture. So they need to know, it's that old speech pattern that they teach you, they taught us decades, about tell them what you're going to tell them and then tell them and then tell them what you
And
told
then
them.
tell them what you told them. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
But
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
happens, what I've noticed is that what seems to be like a lot of people do is they skip the first step. They
Yes,
just tell them, but they don't tell them what they're going to tell them, and they don't tell them why they're going to tell them what they tell them. And if you
exactly.
question that, then it's, oh well, you don't trust me, or it's almost it's almost perceived or comes across as being a kind of threat, and it's not a
Yes,
threat. People need to
yes,
know what to expect.
yeah,
They
yeah,
need to know the beginning, the end from the beginning, if you like.
yeah,
And then as you present these individual parts, they can see, they're sort of looking at the picture on the jigsaw puzzle box. And you give them a piece, they say, oh, I see, that piece goes here and that piece goes here. But if you take that picture away and all you do is give these people a lot of individual pieces, it may make sense in your mind about what it
yeah,
looks like, but it
yeah.
doesn't make any sense to them.
No, exactly. And I think that first step that you're talking about here too, this kind of goes back into my background as a trainer, that like when you're actually designing a training program, whether it be online or whether it be in a workshop or something like that, you need to understand what's the learner's point of entry, what's their entry level knowledge at this
Right.
stage. And I think that becomes a really important part of the message that you communicate in the first instance, that you might say, look, I'm assuming, or I have made some assumptions that people that are joining into my classes will at least have some knowledge of X and Y and Z. So we're going to pick up the story from there, and this is where I'm going to take you. This is the journey. This is how we're going to do it. And then, you get into lesson one. And, part of your planning is obviously to sequence it, and that type of thing. But yeah, that understanding where the learner is coming from at their point of entry, I think, is really important, because then that's the aha moment from them. Okay, this guy understands my situation. Okay, I think we can probably work together.
I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier. You just briefly alluded and said, well, that's an entrepreneurial story and that's another story. Well, let's go back to that. Let's hear that entrepreneurial story, how you came to be in that position where you really wanted to have a business of your own.
Okay.
So I appreciate that you recognize that the world of work was changing. I can wax long about that, having written a book about it, but I'm interested in it, and I'm sure the people that are listening to this interview are going to be interested in how you came to that point and what that entrepreneurial journey looked like for you.
There's probably several starting points to it, but where I became really serious about it was in the early to late 90s. I was still sort of actively involved in corporate training and development. Towards the end of the 90s, workshops and working with people in workshops was kind of, you had them for a day or a week or however long the workshop was, and you kind of left them. And I wanted to get closer to people. So I started to do some extra study, and I got some qualifications in the area of counselling, which led me then into that whole career outplacement space. And I was starting then at that point, because I'd had a number of job changes in my career, and I think I've always kind of been searching for just the right niche and the right sort of opportunity. But it really clunked home to me in the early part of the 2000s that, you know, I'm working with people who've had the rug pulled out from under them. And I was actually what they call an associate consultant for this firm. And where all the pieces really started to come together was that I started doing that work in the early 2000s, 2004, 2005, I suppose. I got quite a lot of work. So an outplacement, an associate consultant is actually a glorified casual for this management consultancy. Mm-hmm. So I was probably getting 20 or 30 hours of work a week, pretty well paid. But then instead of firms laying off, there started to be a skill shortage that started to emerge. I can't quite recall the background as to why that happened, but the skill shortage that started to emerge, particularly here in Australia, meant that organisations weren't being laid off, and all of a sudden my work dried up. And so, you know, that was a big wake-up call for me. So that basically provided the incentive for me to begin to set up my very first website, where I wanted to begin to promote my intellectual property around job search strategy, how to write a resume, how to prepare people for an interview, and so on. So that was the beginning of it. It was the aha moment that, you know, there's not a very secure future in working for a boss. And the other thing that really appealed to me is the lifestyle of working for yourself, that you don't necessarily need to spend an hour and a half or 2 hours on a commute to work to be answerable to a boss. You are your own boss. You get to do it all. But it also meant quite a lot of flexibility in the way that you use your time. And that was very appealing to me as well. And I think probably more recently, as internet and digital technologies have advanced, you know, the ability literally to work from anywhere. So if you've got an internet connection and you know, a laptop computer, you don't need to be geographically bound in any way. So that's also a big part that's fueled the fire for me to continue to be an entrepreneur.
Okay. The reason that there's a skill shortage, the reason that a skill shortage came about, is because the birth rate declined.
Correct.
So what you had, just to give folks a little bit of a history, is you had World War II and the veterans that came out of that, and they produced the largest generation ever, called the baby boom generation.
Yeah.
And the baby boom generation thought, why do I want to have all these kids? You know, so the birth rate dropped, and the generation um, that followed the baby boom generation was one of the smallest ever. And of course, it takes maybe 20 years for that generation to then end up in the workplace, and that
Yes.
creates this big dip in the the availability of any kind of labor, and then that generation moves through their careers. And so at first you have a shortage of people in the lower end of the employment spectrum, and then as things move on, and then you have a dearth of them in the middle management, and then you get up to senior management. There's nobody there. That's how all that works through.
Yeah, yeah, I recall that now. Thank you.
That's what caused it. I remember telling HR managers years ago that they might have to learn to work with the people they had, that they just weren't going to be able to say, oh, well, there's 10 people on the list, who are just waiting for your job. No, they're not.
And I think the really unusual thing about that is that, then as internet and digital technologies began to emerge, people in that sort of middle management rank all of a sudden were let go again.
Mm-hmm.
Because companies were then downscaling, and the tragedy for those people, which is again comes back to my passion, is that there are very few opportunities for people to go back into employment.
Yep.
So what's the alternative? You need to become self-sufficient in some way. Yep. And again, I'm just repeating the message. There's never been a better or an easier time for just the average, ordinary, everyday person who has the desire to do something for themselves to actually get set up online. And there are dozens and dozens of business models.
And with the internet, of course, you don't have to go back into a working environment. No. There's an option there that, a lot of people forget this. The internet is for most of us would say the internet has been here sort of as long as we can remember. But in actual fact, the internet wasn't made available to the public until the early 1990s. Which
Correct.
is not really all that long ago.
Well, I do remember it well.
So it's still a fairly new technology.
Absolutely.
But it has transformed the world of work. It's been a kind of industrial revolution. It's been a kind of revolution.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the information revolution, the information age, isn't it? Which I think is part of the problem too, Bruce. We were talking earlier about how do you make your voice heard. I think there's just so much information out there that people, in deciding who to work with as a coach or a mentor, often get to the state of utter confusion, because there's so many people out there, saying, buy me, buy me, buy me. Who in the heck do you listen to? So that chemistry thing that we talked about before, I think becomes even more important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's why people need to have pictures of them on their profiles, and not pictures of their dog or their favorite mythological beast or their children or something else.
That's exactly right.
It's amazing. The number of people, we were talking about this before, the number of people who say they want to have a business, they create a LinkedIn profile, or they create a Facebook profile, and there's no information there about them. There's no picture, there's no website, there's nothing.
No.
And a LinkedIn profile is so restrictive that you can't really learn about people. You need to have that website.
Yep.
Tell me about what drives you, what motivates you to do more than simply earn a living. Now, you talked a little bit about how you got into this, but now that you're in it, what keeps you going?
Two things. I'll be open, upfront about it. There is a big financial imperative. Because I did so much career and job hopping, I didn't have a lot in retirement savings, and nor did my wife. My wife was self-employed for a good part of her career too. So there's the dilemma, how much savings do you need, and how long are you going to live, and how do you parcel that out so that the money doesn't run out? I'm not sure what the the pension rates are like in the United Kingdom or in the United States or elsewhere, but to actually just exist on a government pension it's basically poverty line lifestyle. Very, very restrictive. So there's a big financial imperative to us. Our retirement savings are gradually dwindling. So it's imperative on us, if we want to continue to enjoy lifestyle choice and a good standard of living, that we do that. But alongside that, and I alluded to this before, that there are so many people that I interact with who are going into retirement or who are retired who say, you know what, I actually still want to work. And I actually had some trouble believing that at the beginning, but you begin to talk and interact with people who are retired and who have this dream of maybe playing golf, doing gardening, having social outings with friends, doing a little bit of traveling. But there gets to a point in retirement where you can only do so much of that. Yep. And I think one of the things that keeps people energized in employment and in careers is their sense of identity is tied up with that, but there's also the feeling of being useful. And so that's a big part for me too. Look, I've learnt and done so much in my life, and I'm not saying I'm a model citizen in any way, but there's a passion and a burn in me that if I can help people in their lives through sharing a little bit about what I know and what I've learned, that makes me feel really good. And I have thoroughly enjoyed this journey going online. If you'd asked me 4 or 5 years ago, when I really seriously got into this, to list the skills that I now have as a result, and it's all been self-directed learning. Look, I'm amazed at how far I've come. And every day, we're talking about this earlier about technology and trying to work things out. But I really love that, working out how to solve problems. I've learned a particular technique. I know how to do this. I know how to do it. And having learnt that, I come across I had an hour-long conversation with a brand new client just yesterday. And this stuff just came pouring out of my head. This guy saying, how do you do this? How do you do that? Here, let me show you. And it's just second nature now. But there was a beginning 4 or 5 years ago. I knew none of that. So that really keeps me energized. I love to use my brain. I love to use the creativity, but most importantly, I also love to share what I know. That gives me huge satisfaction. So they're my burns: money and helping, and using my brain and feeling productive.
But you've had to struggle through this, haven't you? I mean, you've had to. I know of people who are retired who drive school buses, have gone back and gotten teaching qualifications, and are doing various other things. Yeah. So there would have been something that would have made you say, you know what, even though I'm struggling, even though this is turning out to be harder than I expected, or whatever the reason is, I don't want to drive a school bus, even though it's easy money. I don't want to, I don't know what you do in Australia, but bag groceries for people, or I don't want to.
Yeah, or go and work in a something like a Home Depot,
doing something else. What has how have you overcome the struggles that you've had to go through? Getting back to motivation here, really.
Yeah, sure.
Push through and keep on doing and helping people build online businesses as opposed to doing something else.
Look, a big part of it, and this makes me feel a bit uncomfortable to say, but part of it is actually born out of laziness, if that makes any kind of sense, because I well know that set up the right way, an online business can operate autopilot's not necessarily the term, but there's this issue, this ability to create some resources once and then repurpose them. Mm-hmm. So again, set up the right way, you can almost have an evergreen coaching business. You do some teaching and you record it, and then you can actually sell the stuff that you've recorded as a pre-packaged program. So there's 2 parts to this. If you set it up the right way, you don't have to be sitting at a computer desk for 20, 30, 40, 50 hours a week sometimes. done the right way, you can actually have a work week that might be 10 or 15 hours of duration. And done the right way, you could actually have several passive income streams.
Yes.
So what that means is that you can cover a whole range of needs. One is there's the creative stuff and putting that together. Secondly, that you've got an income stream which preserves your lifestyle. And the third part of life to me is life's meant to be enjoyed. Now, you can only really do that in a good way if you've got the time to do it and the money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hanging out there. And it's been my strongly held belief I have the capability to set up that kind of business where I can make a choice every single week how much work I'm going to do that week. That's as bold as it is.
No, that's fine. That's what we want, is that kind of transparency.
Yeah.
That kind of real world experience.
And there's lots of things that I can be doing. It's not just about going out to lunch or having another holiday. I've got 4 children who live in different parts of Australia, 10 grandchildren, and if you've got time and money. During my career, I didn't spend a lot of time with my kids. I often had 2 and 3 jobs. I don't want that, first of all, to happen to my kids. I want to leave my kids with a legacy, but I also want to use this time of my life to choose to travel to another state in Australia and spend, 2, 3, 4 days or a week or a month with my children and my grandchildren. There are those things which are like really important in life. I've got a very elderly father that he's into his 90s now. Well, he's obviously not going to be around with us forever. And it's the ability, like if I had a job, I couldn't go and spend an hour or 2 or 3 with him, So it's just that it's understanding that if you put the work in and if you're using the right model, you do have the ability to make those lifestyle choices. You don't have to turn up to work because the boss will fire you if you don't. If you've got your own business, you are the boss. And, putting all the posts in the ground, create something that has an income to it, that's helping people. It ticks a lot of boxes for me.
There's an old saying that says that if you do nothing, you can never stop to take a rest. And
I like that.
the idea that when you reach a retirement age, let's say, or you come to the end of your normal working career, that you should just put your feet up and eat, drink, and be merry and all that sort of thing, just doesn't work. I remember reading a long time ago that the age of 60 was the new 40. Now, a lot of stuff that comes out is just marketing, and it's intended to make people feel better about themselves and all that kind of thing. But when you think about our parents, for example, and what they were like at 40 and how much energy they had, and then you think about how much energy people have when they get to 60 and what they're able to do, there's a lot of truth to that.
Absolutely.
I know people, there's a friend of mine who's in his early 90s who still drives to church, and people are in better shape physically, and they are able to look after themselves, and they have greater mobility.
I think, and just to go back to the point I made before too, that you're talking about age and ageism, and so I'm in my late 60s. I used to think people who were 60 when I was younger, were old, and you'd sort of see them go into retirement.
Mm-hmm.
But the facts are, with medical technology, better diets, all of those sorts of things, people are living longer. So, I actually had a passion once to actually retire from my career in my early 50s. I'm glad I didn't now, but let's say from 60 until mid 80s, that's 25 years in retirement. Mm-hmm. How much gardening or how many games of golf or how many days fishing can you put in there before you go, what? I just, what's the meaning of all this? What's the purpose of life?
Right.
It's those sorts of big questions. And I think, in Australia, for example, they've set up universities of the third age, particularly to cater to people in this sort of third stage of their life. understanding that people still have a passion to learn, a hunger to learn, who want to be productive. Facts are like retirement it is not just about, as you say, having a rest. It palls after a while.
And it gets boring.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I had this was many years ago when I was a kid, but I had a great aunt who was, she was with us, and then she was put in hospital, and then she died. And I think she was in her mid-60s or something like that. And what I remember about how she looked, and she, she was clean living, didn't smoke, all that, was sensible.
Yes.
But what I remember her looking like when she was in her 60s is the way people look today when they're in their 80s. Yeah. There's that much of a difference in how people have how much healthier they are.
Yeah.
People get sick. I don't discount that for a minute. But on the whole, the generation of the people in their 80s, mid 80s, let's say, who are starting to look old, you can see it in their faces. You see transformation. People 50 years ago looked like that in their 60s.
Yes.
And you don't want to get to a point in your life where you think, okay, I'm going to chuck it all in now. I'm going to take early retirement. I'm going to do all these things.
Yeah.
And then now what?
Yeah,
now
that's
you can
right.
move on, and you can set up an online business, and you can use your intellect and your creative skills and change people's lives and do some good.
Yes. Yep. That's what it's about. That's exactly what it's about.
Yeah. What does the future hold now, do you think, for your business? What kinds of ambitions do you have to take it from where it is to show the next step?
I've got a huge vision, and this current environment, I think, with so many people losing jobs, so many people who are in businesses which are shut down, traditional sorts of businesses, I think this whole virus situation has shut things down, and I think there's going to be an enormous economic impact. And I think, this is my belief and this is my vision, I think there's going to be so many people who are now open, but even stronger than that, who are desperate for an opportunity to get away from traditional employment, which may not be an option for them anymore. How do I then begin to support myself and my family? How do I pay my bills, my mortgage? I know there's all sorts of schemes and government interventions planned, and there's talk about universal wage and all of these sorts of things. But, I think at the end of the day, many, many people want to be self-reliant. They just need to be shown how. And I think the other thing that comes into this is that, the internet increasingly becomes the first point of contact where people have an issue or a challenge or a problem, in addition to all the other things that the internet does, like entertainment and education and all of that. But people are now going online and searching for simple things like, how do I start a work home from operation? How do I make money online? Because facts are, like, people are going to get into desperate situations. So my immediate goal for the next 12 or 18 months is I want to help at least 1,000 people to successfully establish and then scale an online business. That's the vision that I have. And I've basically just recently finished up setting up a whole new Facebook tribe to that end. And I've already started doing the coaching within that tribe. But that's my passion and that's my mission, is to help people transition away from that reliance on an employer or another party for their livelihood, for their financial security, which in turn then impacts their ability to make lifestyle choices. So that's my passion, that's my burn. Positively changing the lives of 1,000 people through the coaching and the mentoring that I provide. And I think it's entirely possible.
Yeah, and I think it will keep you occupied.
Definitely will be. Mate, I think the other thing,
you won't get bored.
No, I think like in no other time in history, there's never been such a a demand, or will be a demand, for online coaches. Now, I coach coaches, but like people are looking for, I did a live post today, and I'll put a challenge inside my group. What 100 ideas could you have for somebody who's looking for ideas about setting up an online home business? And it doesn't have to be business. It doesn't have to be really meaty stuff like relationships counseling or stress management. People now who are at home, in some instances, are looking for ways to spend their time. So there could be a successful online business built around how do you learn how to sew? How do you learn to play a musical instrument? How do you learn how to play darts? Et cetera, et cetera. I want to go fishing. How do I get started? There are dozens and literally hundreds of ideas that people could pick up and say, you know what, I'm a good fisherman, or I know how to sew, or I know how to knit. Why don't I teach other people? That's what it's about. People are looking for people to coach them. So I think time is right. Time is now. It's great.
Yeah, I agree with you. How can people find you?
I think the best place, well, I've got a website, which is getonlinelab.com, or one word, getonlinelab.com. But I also have this newly established Facebook group. So if you were to look at, type in Facebook /getonlinelab, that would also get people in touch with my group.
Okay.
So Facebook /group /getonlinelab.
That's Get Online Lab, LAB.
Yep, as in laboratory.
In case any of you are struggling with the various accents, there are people from all over the world who are involved in this, and so you never know.
No, you don't.
Is there anything that you would like to add? Anything that we haven't talked about? We have nothing that we've touched on. Something that you want to make sure that people know?
No, look, it's been a terrific interview. It's always really good to reflect on the journey and to talk to others about what it is that motivates you and what keeps you going. And I find that energizes me. It takes me back to my roots and my reason why. And we all need a reason why to do things.
Yes.
And I think people, if they decide to do that, they'll have their very own reason why, and it'll be important to them. And, I guess from a coach's perspective, my aim is to meet people where they're at. The only other thing, just a word of encouragement, really, I think Henry Ford might have said this, don't let fear get in the way of attempting something like that. If you think you can, you can. And if you think you can't, you're right. Believe you can do it. That's why coaches exist, is to help people to get ahead. So if you've got the reason why, there will be coaches out there that can help provide those steps, which will in turn make a big difference in your life. So I can
good coaches will be able to help you find a reason why as well.
I think so. To clarify that, that's basically how I start my programs. Why are you doing this? What's the outcome? And just some of those things that we talked about, like getting clear about what's the problem that you're wanting to solve for your clients, and being clear about the process that you want to lead them through. That's all part of it.
Okay, great. Well, this has been lovely to talk to you. That's a British expression, but I've really enjoyed this. I'm sure other people will have benefited. Your website again is getonlinelab.com, and the same name also for the Facebook group. And then you can sign up for that and then learn more about Anthony and how he can help you out.
Indeed.
So thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Anthony, for this time, and we'll see you later.
Right. I appreciate the opportunity, Bruce, and best wishes to you too, my friend.
Thank you.
See you later.
Okay.